So welcome back to another episode. Today's show we are going to do a straight up product shoot from start to finish, and I'm going to show you all the ins and outs of doing a bog standard product photo shoot in the studio. So welcome back to the show. Today's product shoot is going to be a product called Oatly. It's Swedish. I'm in Sweden. It's a nice product. I don't drink it myself and I'm not being paid to do it, but it's really colorful and I thought it'd be nice to do a bit of a colorful product photography. This is what we're doing. Next up, of course, we need a camera and some accessories. We're going to be using the trigger in order to fire the strip box on the stand. We're going to be using the light meter with a dome. We're going to be using the color checker passport, and we're going to be using a tethered cable. In terms of what we've got our rolling backdrop, pink today. For the actual table itself, it's an old workbench that I cut in two and made one big piece and one small piece, which is handy for different shoots, small things, big things. And of course we've got the laptop tethered here so we can shoot directly from the laptop and see it in the big screen. And last but not least is a sturdy tripod, as well as we might be using a grid on the softbox if you want a little bit more control. And of course some sandbags to keep the tripod and the light stand down. The small tip to do with these bags is a lot of people like to fill them with sand or water or heavy things, whereas I put weights in. Got two of those, 4 kilos, nice and compact. Slide them in the pocket and zip them up. So I've got the camera ready, time to tether up. With this particular camera there's a slot on the side and the place where like that. Carefully take the USB-C end. And of course, in this particular case, I want to shoot tethered, so I have Lightroom Classic, which not the normal Lightroom, but Lightroom Classic. Once you're plugged in and installed, with the cable, you choose File, Shoot Tethered, Tethered Capture, and across, Start Tethered Capture. So now we're hooked up and ready to go. Now it's time to get the lights on to light the subject. Now what I like to do is I like to shoot at ISO 100, shutter speed 125. That leaves me the variable of what amount of power is coming out of the light and what is the corresponding f-stop for that. We are shooting in quite a short, small space with a black bounce card at the back to stop the light reflecting around too much. I have the light angled downward. As you'll see from here, the light comes down and bounces straight up. So the next thing you want to do with, the way I like to do things with the light in a small space, we're not shooting a portrait, wedding, grand, Mercedes in a big studio space. We don't actually need a lot of light. So I've got a strip box, and the way I like to do it is I start on minimum power, which in this case is on 1/64th power. And then I'll work out how much light is coming out, measure with the light meter, and then I'll raise the light power as needed to get to the nice sweet spot on the aperture. So the next thing we're going to need is a trigger in order to connect onto the camera and tell the strobe to fire. The other thing we're going to need is a light meter to measure how much power is coming to tell the camera what f-stop is correct exposure. So I do have a video on how to use a light meter, but I like to shoot at ISO 100, shutter speed 125. All I need to do now is measure how much power. So in this case it's telling me that there's not a lot of power and I need to have my aperture set at 2.2, which I'm not going to do and I can't do. So I've added more power. Let's try again. This time we got 5.0, but I still want more power. I want a bigger number on the aperture and I want more power coming down. This time it's 8.0 and that's perfect for exactly what we want. So now what I'll do is set the aperture on the camera and we're good to go. So the next thing I did was to check the guidelines inside the optics of the camera so that the camera is level. The second thing I noticed was, classic mistake, I've got a very broad subject with a background behind. I do have the narrow background, but from this angle, the width of the products are just the same width as the background and there's nothing overlapping. So I'm going to have to move everything forward in order to get more of the background on the side. And that of course means moving everything else as well. The lights, the stand, the camera, the laptop. Now we can finally get back to business. I'll need to do my meter readings again. And it's still F8. The next thing I need to do is pull out the color checker passport. So I can use this to get a reference for correct color on the image. Okay, so the first exposure seems okay. The one thing I'm thinking is I like my pictures nice and bright, right at the edge of the clipping highlights on the right hand side of the histogram. So I think I can go up with just a little bit more power. Now what way could I do that? Some of you might say, well, he could change the aperture, or why not just dial up the power? But going up one more stop is actually adding a lot more light than you might think. So what would be another way to just nudge up the brightness a little bit? I can bring the light down. See what I did there? Minor adjustment, bringing the light down closer to the subject, the light, which means it's just the intensity is just a little bit greater, but I'm still going to keep it at F8. Let's try again. And I think I could go one more. Let's try. Just on the edge, possibly a little bit of flaring. So I might just take the safe route and go back up to where I was the first time. And I can always brighten it a little bit in Photoshop without having lost detail. Okay, so I'm done with the color checker passport. I've got my exposure levels correct. And I'm quite happy to take a few shots to see where we're going. So it's looking quite nice in the details. The next thing I'm thinking about, the positioning of the camera isn't quite in the middle of the product. So I'm going to move over and try and balance up to get the actual angle looking straight on at the product. Okay, so now I've adjusted the camera, I've moved the light over a little bit to just looking straight down the middle, aligning the crosshairs in the middle of the two products at the other sides. So now you can see the image is looking a lot straighter on. The other thing you might be wondering is what sort of perspective am I looking at? I'm on about 35 millimeters at the moment. Now one thing I could do is move the camera back, zoom in a bit more to get even more straighter angle on the product. The other thing to think about is that the line of sight for the middle of the lens is about roughly halfway. The line height of the lens is roughly halfway between the height of the cartons. If I'm too low, then you start getting perspective happening with the thing. So I want to be up looking in the middle, and the middle this way and the middle that way to get the even, clean, square perspective. The next thing I want to look at, if you look carefully at the image, you'll see that I've got some gaps between the products. I'm going to try and squeeze them together just to get them slightly lined up militarily, a little bit neater. There we go, the product's looking nice and squashed together, much tighter fit, like sardines. Now if you look at the edges of the far left and right cartons, you'll see that there's still a bit of perspective where the front of the packet is almost pointing out versus the back of the packet is angled in. So there is a way we could change that. And of course at the moment I have everything lined up straight. Try and make a smile shape, and that way optically I'm tricking the camera into thinking that everything's looking straight at the lens, and that way rather than having it in a straight line, I'm going to have it more bowed, and the camera is looking that way, and then we'll try and straighten up some of those lines. Okay, so I'm happy with that. My blue paper that I put down, which I thought was a good idea in the beginning to try and contrast the blue with the pink, obviously now isn't working so well. These things happen, so I think what I might do now is take away the blue paper and just keep the white underlay. Apart from that, I think everything's looking good. The second thing you'll notice is that the gaps between, by making it slightly U-shape and angling the corners of the product close to each other, it's sort of closed up the gaps quite nicely as well. So I've taken away the blue bits of paper, we don't need those anymore. That's looking better. I think now we're really getting into the details, but I think I just want to fiddle around a little bit more to try and, you can see a little bit of a curve. If you look at the bottom edges of the cartons, they do kind of look like they are bending a bit. So I'm just going to play with those a bit, try and get everything shape neatly ordered. Because again, yes, you could do any of this stuff in Photoshop to fix things, but why would you when you could do it right now, and then that gives you time to do other things in the evening rather than playing with Photoshop. There we go, that straightened out quite nicely. Yeah, this is looking good. I'm liking what I'm seeing. Everything's in exposure. And I think the only thing now is maybe I might just zoom back out a little bit to see if I can get a little bit more background on the left and right. There we go. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that first shot. Now while I've been doing this, I have come up with another idea which I think might be a cool idea. Now that we've got the straight-laced product shot, let's see if we can have a little bit of fun. I got an idea, let's try. As you might have guessed, I'm going to turn this into a little bit of a U-shape form. I think it could be quite fun to see. All right, let's take a shot to see what I'm seeing. Okay, so what I'm seeing is quite even distribution. However, now that the left and right cartons are closer, I'm seeing that I could raise my camera lens up just a tiny bit more, so I'm slightly higher at maybe the middle of the Oatly height, so that the bottom of the cartons don't sway out at the bottom left and right. As you can see, it's not quite perpendicular. And yes, I know you can do this in Photoshop, but I want to get it right in camera the first time and get the best shot I can at the best quality using the best optics. Okay, I've got that locked in optically. It's the best it's going to be in the time I have, but let's do it without using a tilt shift lens. So let's do it. Looking good. Now this is another detail thing, but I did notice on the sides of the packets they all had different lettering and words and things on the side. And I did see some of the other packets when I did the test for this had some slightly different writing. So I'm going to bring those out now that we're using the side, bringing that to the fore. I've got some that are a bit funky. So I quite like the wording, in oats we trust, and you are one of us. I thought it had a bit more bold impact. I thought it'd be good for the shot. I just want to again just even up so that they look roughly balanced. The product on the left is a little bit on a shorter angle, so it's not as open as the brown one. So I would just want to try and match things up, just to try and get things evenly balanced best I can. And let's try that again. Yeah, that's better, as you can see. If anything, I've probably opened it up too much. I know it's only a small thing, but great, well that looks about right. I'm looking at the negative space of the white and looking at the shape that the white is making below the product directly. I'm just kind of picturing in my mind, is that an even shape on both sides? It does look like now the grey and the brown on the right is slightly coming in at a faster angle of attack. So I'm just going to push those out to the side and open it up to see if I can even out the harmony of the geometric shape. It's only a small thing, but I think you'll agree. You can see what I've done there. And call me crazy, I'm just going to pull it back in a little bit more. So now I think I've undone some of that damage, and I think we might be getting somewhere. There we go. I'm happy with that shot. It's your classic Roman columns in a semicircle. The second thing I'm going to do now is, before I call it a day, is I think I've got quite a lot of white space below now, and I think the background is nice. So I'm going to raise everything up with the camera. Not tilt, but raise from the tripod up to get a little bit more height and just get a little bit less white in the bottom. Okay, like I said, you could do it in Photoshop, but I want to get it done correctly. So there we go. Now the only other thing that we could do, we still have some time, is I'm quite happy with that shot, and but I'm just thinking whether we're a lot closer to the background now, so there's clearly some light coming on to the background, lightening it, and I'm just curious to see, although I'm happy with this shot, I'm wondering whether we could add the grid just to see if we could darken up some of the vignetting on the back of the background a little bit, just to give it a little bit more flavor, so to speak. So let's do that. To do that, I'm going to get this grid material. There we go. That took a while. So as you can see now, the scene is basically this. You've got the camera facing the products, and as I dip down and look up, you can see the grid of the light. Nothing else has changed. The same power, same everything. Let's see what happens. Ooh, can you see the difference? Now the background has come alive. You can see from the histogram that it has taken away some of the power. We've not got as bright on the right hand side, so I'm actually going to up the power one and see what happens. So I've upped the power one. Now the histogram is actually quite clipped, so the difference of one stop has made it far brighter. So I'm going to undo. Right, I've gone back up one, and it's getting there. I quite like the moody feel of it. And I'm looking at the histogram. I still think it could be brighter, but we know that one stop is too much. And now I made the classic mistake of dropping the light too far down. Oh no, I didn't. Okay, well I think that looks good. The other thing I'm going to point out is another nice thing I like to do is I like to make sure that the sides are even. The background sides are the same left and right sort of gap, the negative space, as well as I'm looking at the balance of the I've just noticed something too. The two cartons in the middle, the one on the right, is slightly angled away and not quite as flat as the one next to it. So I'm going to fix that again. Another opportunity to do it in situ. I'm glad I spotted that. So let's have a look. That's better. Although now I'm going to undo the damage halfway. There we go. Is there anything else? Is there anything else? I am going to try one more thing. I'm going to lower the camera again, just because I'm looking at the right hand side of the oats product and I feel like we're a bit too high. So I'm going to lower the camera again. I think what I didn't think about was that it's still at the end of the day, it wants to be a hero shot. So let's come down lower. The classic hero shot is sort of looking up at your product, making it look big and venerable. And I think I slightly lost sight of that, but I think this is better. And you can see now on the right hand side there's slightly more space than on the left, and that's annoying me. I'm going to fix it. Let's try that. There we go. Although now I have to undo the damage. Right. Third time lucky. That's good. Okay, so I'm happy with that shot, although I have said that many times now. The one thing I'm just curious to do before we pack up is to do a proper hero shot, getting nice and low and looking up at your hero product. It's going to distort things, but I'm just curious to see how it will look. Apart from that, I'm happy with this shot, and this is my final shot. Okay, so for one last final alteration or alternative, I've lowered the camera and broken my rule of tilting the camera up a bit, but that's because I want to achieve the hero image shot. So let's see how that looks. Yes, I quite like the symmetry on that actually. The second in from the right is just annoying me ever so slightly. Again, it's only a small adjustment, but let's... There we go. Right, I'm happy with that. I can live with that. I think that is that one and the previous one is a good shot, and that's it. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned something. I thought it gave you some, I hope it gave you some inspiration and looking at the fundamentals of how to get a standard shot. Nothing exciting, nothing sexy, but still nevertheless a lot going on technically. I think if you watch this a couple of times, practice the concepts that we've talked about, I think we've come a long way. Okay, see you on the next episode. Bye.